Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Salebox for the 26th of December 2014. My name is TotalBiscuit, rounding up today's Steam deals. Missed out on yesterday because, you know what, I took a day off for Christmas and I'm entirely okay with that. Hopefully you guys are as well. But I will give you some quick recommendations if you want to grab something from yesterday's sale. It is still available for the next 20 or so hours. There are a couple of decent-ish titles on there. I'd go for Planetary Annihilation for 80% off. I'm not massively keen on that game. I don't think it's incredible, and as a backer, I'm not 100% happy with it, but for that price, it's pretty damn good. It's still a fairly fun RTS. It unfortunately suffers from having some interesting mechanical ideas, but some really lackluster unit design. That's what really bothers me about it, but it's still a pretty fun game, especially if you can get some friends together and play on a big map, and you can do some crazy stuff in that game. You can make a Death Star, you can smash planets into other planets, and the circular map design is very intriguing, so it's not bad for that price. It's a decent enough RTS experience. The other thing on that list that I would probably get for the price would be Democracy 3. That's a game about really sliding sliders, honestly. It's about manipulating a democracy and dealing with a whole bunch of different issues. The thing about it is that it's best played when you go in there with an agenda, because the way to win that game very easily is to pander to every demographic, so to basically be a politician. But if you really want to change a country, like you want to turn America into a socialist utopia, that's really hard, and that's actually a challenge and kind of fun to do. So Democracy 3, if you like moving sliders around and watching what happens, is kind of fun. The only other game on the list that I think is probably worth picking up would be The Stick of Truth, which is obviously a great game. It's not an incredible discount, but if you are looking to pick that game up, it's deep enough to justify having a look at it. Everything else on there I can kind of take or leave, and I'm not hugely keen on. Alright, let's begin, shall we, by having a look at today's sales. We'll kick it off with Banished. That's going to be 60% off. It is a city builder of sorts, but it's really more of a survival game. It's about keeping your people alive. Everything out in that world is kind of trying to kill you. You are dealing with food shortages, firewood shortages, people die of disease, people die of cold in the winter, and so on and so forth. It's about careful resource management and extremely careful expansion at the right speed. You expand too fast, you're dead. You expand too slow, you're dead. It's that simple. The only problem I've got with it is there really isn't a particularly in-depth tech tree. You'd expect to advance your village with new technologies, but there's really not a lot of that at all, and the supply chains are very basic. You don't really have too many raw materials going into another raw material, going into like a more complex material into a finished good. It's not really like the Settlers or anything along those lines, but it's still a fairly compelling experience. What I will say about it is that it does have a mod kit, and I imagine that eventually there's going to be some pretty interesting mods developed for this game, but as it stands, if you're looking for a survival city builder, then Banished is really kind of cool, and you've got to admit, it's an impressive work from one guy. I personally found that once you master the formula behind it, though, there really wasn't a great deal of replayability. Risen 3, 50% off. This game's a bit of a mixed bag. It's not awful, and it's certainly packed with content. It's really quite a nice looker as well. It's got a pretty fun magic system involved in it, but the combat is not ideal. It's not particularly responsive. I suppose maybe my expectations have been set by games like Dark Souls and Lords of the Fallen, but really in this, the combat is overly flashy for no good reason. There's a lot of delay between attacks, and as a result, I didn't feel particularly connected to my character. There are some interesting quests and a decent amount of content to be found, though. It's just you have to sort of persevere to really enjoy it. The game still has some problems here and there as well. It's somewhat buggy. The voice acting and the writing is kind of cringeworthy at times, but if you're looking for a fairly in-depth open-worldy RPG, then Risen 3 is not the worst one that you could pick up. Brothers: A Tale of Two Sons, 90% off. If you have a controller, this is a must-buy. I've said it before, this is my favorite game of all time. It is a 3-hour experience, so there's not really a lot of replayability there, which is why, of course, the initial $15 price tag was something that put a lot of people off. This game is incredibly clever in terms of its mechanics, and yet incredibly simple in terms of its mechanics. It uses the two sticks of the controller to control two characters simultaneously. That's why I call it single-player co-op. And it involves using both characters simultaneously to solve environmental puzzles to progress through the game. And it's a narrative experience, but it's got a ton of gameplay in it. This is why I really love it. It's a game that marries narrative and storytelling and actual real emotional connection with mechanics. And that's truly what I think games can do, which any other medium just is completely incapable of. And I think that a lot of games have tried to force narrative in very ungame-like ways, in ways that don't really engage the player through the game mechanics, and Brothers does so perfectly. It's not a strikingly innovative story, but it's well told, and it's incredibly powerful and emotional. I absolutely love Brothers. And if you do have a controller, I could not recommend it more. Please do pick it up for that price. It's an absolute bargain. Sit down, play it through in one session, close your door, don't be interrupted, and just soak it in. I was blown away by this game. Kerbal Space Program, 40% off. This is one of the few early access games, as I've said before, that I would recommend because there is so much content in it, and it's a very unique experience. It's about building spaceships and trying to get them into space and completing various objectives. Can you get something into space? Can you get it to orbit? Can you get it to land again? Can you build a space station? Can you reach the moon? It's almost an educational game. It teaches you quite a lot about physics, and it's a hell of a lot of fun in and of itself. It's just great to build some crazy device and see if you can even get it off the ground to begin with. And it's very haphazard. There's a lot of really cool trial and error going on with it. There's an amazing mod scene. The developers are constantly updating the game, and even though it's in early access, it's packed full of content. It even has a demo to try, so this is certainly something that you might want to give a shot. Hell, I'd actually recommend buying this for a kid, like particularly someone who's maybe just getting to their teen years, because they might learn quite a bit about science, and it's a very engaging way to learn, too. It's very enjoyable. I said it before, if we had this in the classroom, I think a lot of people would be way more interested in space exploration, because this is a hell of a lot of fun. Thief, 75% off. Yeah, I like it. A lot of people don't. I was outspoken on this title, I'll tell you that for a fact, but you gotta bear in mind that while I respect what the original Thief games did, I didn't really like them, because, frankly, I don't enjoy large open levels that I can get very easily lost in, and I don't really enjoy stealth gameplay. So, Thief's levels are a little bit more directed, they're somewhat more linear, the stealth system is a little bit easier, and of course it gives you a little bit more viability in terms of combat, although if you end up getting detected, you might end up being in a decent amount of trouble. It's also got a fairly engaging story, good voice acting, and some very intriguing locations. So, to me, Thief was actually very enjoyable indeed. It's good PC port as well, great options menu and things like that. But for a lot of people that enjoyed the original titles, they found it dumbed down, they found it very disappointing. So I can certainly understand that. A lot of people have commented that Dishonored is a much better game than Thief. I think it's a different game to Thief. It's really more of a stealth action game, stealth assassination, whereas Thief really is about sneaking around and stealing things. But I found Thief to be compelling enough, and for that price, you might want to take the risk on it. Shadow of Mordor, 40% off. Alright, well, this is one of the best action titles of the year, as far as I'm concerned. It has taken a fairly tired open-world formula and thrown a really cool system into it, which generates stories, essentially. It's the Nemesis system, which allows you to create rivals and adversaries, manipulate the hierarchy of the Orcish horde, and, of course, ride around Mordor being a general badass. It, for the most part, uses the Arkham combat system, although with sufficient additions and tweaks to it to make it feel suitably unique. And it's a beautiful, if somewhat grim, and gory representation of Mordor. It's one of the best games we've had tied into the Middle-earth universe for a very long time indeed. This game is an absolute blast. Anno 2070, 75% off. This game is great, but it's burdened with hideous, horrible DRM. It uses the Taegis system, which is awful. It's got a 3-machine activation limit. Absolute pain in the arse. But the game is really, really good. The Anno series is overlooked quite often when looking at games that deal with trading and city building, and the games before this were all set in the Age of Sail at various times in history, and I enjoyed all of them. Anno 2070, well, they made a game that was set in the future, and it has some interesting ideas. It's got some faction-based play. The way they do missions is a little bit unique, and of course you can build all sorts of strange and wonderful things. And if you can stomach the tutorial, which is fairly lengthy, Anno 2070 is a really good strategy game. DLC-wise, it's all pretty cheap, so you might as well pick the package up. The expansion content is Deep Ocean. Everything else is just little bits and pieces. You can pick up the Complete Edition. It will save you a little bit of money, although you can just buy Deep Ocean because that is the main piece of content, and everything else you can pretty much skip without worrying too much about missing out on key content. Most of it is ornamental or little bonuses here and there. But Anno is a very unique series, and hopefully it continues. I just really hope they don't burden it with horrible DRM the next time they decide to take it for a little outing. And finally, Counter-Strike Go, 50% off. They know they don't have to discount this game much. It sells very well on its own at the $15 price tag. It sells even better when they cut the price in half. This is a really, really great shooter at this point. I love CSGO, but the thing is, I dip in not to play the main mode. I actually play some of the side modes. I play a lot of Arms Race. I really like that. And the deathmatch mode is a lot of fun as well. I don't really play the main 5-on-5 Counter-Strike competitive, and you know what? That's okay, because there's a great player base for all of that. People have got a little bit obsessed about collecting knives and guns these days. It's getting a little bit silly, but they don't really affect the game anyway, so why is that a problem? The answer is, well, it's not. Counter-Strike Global Offensive right now is one of the most popular shooters on PC for a very good reason, and you should be giving it a shot. If you've never played Counter-Strike, well, the cool thing about CSGO is it's got a lot of introductory modes which take some of the principles from the competitive mode, but they make it a little bit more accessible and help you sort of wean yourself onto it. Or maybe you never go to the competitive mode, and that's entirely okay. I log in to play gun game every once in a while, and I love it. Why the hell not? Alright folks, that is me done for the day. Thank you very much for watching the Salebox. Before I go, I would like to remind you that if you are in the US, you might want to have a look at Amazon, because they've got some pretty damn good deals going on, some of which are actually better than Steam. It's also an alternative if for some reason you don't wish to use Steam for some of the titles. There's a couple of things on there that are really nice value-wise. For instance, you can get an origin code for Command & Conquer The Complete Collection. That comes with all of the CNC titles, so if you want a little bit of nostalgia, that's a way to get it. You can get Crysis 3 for $4 right now, which is a ridiculous bargain. Dead Space 3 for $4 as well. You can also get World in Conflict Complete for $2.50. Now, it's not a Steam version, that's standalone, so if you like your Steam games, then you won't get that. And a couple of people have been having problems running it for some reason on Windows 7 64-bit. For me, it's not been a problem, but you might want to look up information on that nonetheless. But that was an incredible RTS. There's some pretty damn good deals over there, so you might want to go and have a look before you dive into today's Steam sales. Thank you very much for watching, folks, and I will see you next time.